Most of Week 3 is in the books, and it started on Thursday night with an NFC clash between the 49ers and Giants. San Francisco won with a score of 30-12, and I think there's a few big takeaways on both sides. San Francisco first, and guys, they are a unit. They are 3-0 and comfortably won this game, and my biggest concern for them entering the year was how they would start, because the 49ers have been notorious for starting slow, and they hit the ground running. Christian McCaffrey has scored a touchdown in 12 straight games, and with Brandon Ayuk out, they needed both Debo and George Kittle to step up, and they did. Next man up mentality. They are very much a Super Bowl contender. For New York, they were set up to fail from the start with both Saquon and Andrew Thomas out, and even if those guys were healthy, this result doesn't change. No offense, Giants fans. Maybe the score is a little less ugly, but there was a ginormous talent discrepancy between these two teams in this game. I worry about the Giants from a long-term standpoint, which will be fully discussed in a video on its own, but I worry this team could be 1-5 through 6 games, as their next 3 are home against Seattle, at Miami, and at Buffalo. And on to Sunday we go, and the first game we will discuss is the Falcons and Lions. Detroit won with the score of 20-6, and this type of game is my biggest concern for Atlanta moving forward. Stop the run and force Desmond Ridder to beat you and let everything else fall into place. The Falcons ran the ball 20 times in this game for just 44 yards, and when your biggest strength is taken away, life will generally be more difficult. A huge credit to the Lions defense, as the Falcons run game is ferocious. And for the Lions and for everyone who panicked early on, this was the type of running game Jahmyr Gibbs is capable of. Not only that, but Sam Laporta is a great player in this offense and stepped up in a big way with J-Mo out. Amon-Ra is one of the best receivers in the league, and it showed, and this was a big win for the Lions to advance to 2-1, who have a huge Thursday night game against the Packers in what will be an early battle for the North. And speaking of the Packers, we're going a little west to Lambeau to discuss Saints-Packers. The biggest and most obvious takeaway or thing to note for New Orleans was the clear difference in how the team plays when Derek's on the field versus how they played when Jameis was on the field. The Saints were up 17-0 when Derek left the game, and to be up 17-0 and for Jameis to have 16 passing attempts, knowing he's a backup to me is a little ridiculous when I thought they should have focused on running the football, at least more than they did. They can win next week against Tampa and be 3-1, so it's not entirely over if Derek is healthy, of course. And Saints fans, you guys know this, but Chris Olave is a wide receiver 1 and is one of the most underrated players in football. For the Packers, after Favre and Rodgers, the question after a 17-point comeback is going to be asked: is Jordan Love next? They had so many guys out and still rallied enough to win, and there's not enough that can be said when your starting left tackle, corner, running back, and top receiver are all out. This is a substantial win this early in the Jordan Love era. To the Big Apple to discuss Patriots-Jets, and Big Brother won yet again. It's been since 2015 since the Jets have beat the Patriots, and this isn't a crazy takeaway, but Zach Wilson is not anywhere close to an NFL starting caliber quarterback. It's hard for any play caller to make up for how bad he is at times, and I get they've played 3 good defenses to start the year, which isn't ideal for Zach, but does it matter? This team is now 1-2, and it's a shame because of how talented this roster is. For New England, I think this is the definition of a win is a win, and I think Bill Belichick would agree with that. Congratulations to the Pats, because a win in this league is difficult to come by, but this win doesn't leave you feeling like you're going anywhere. At least it probably shouldn't. But what I will say positively for the Patriots is I think rookie corner Christian Gonzalez is going to be good for a very long time. Down several hundred miles on I-95 to discuss Texans-Jags, and I think the big takeaway is, which to me is all that matters for the Texans' future, knowing what their expectations were entering the year, is you have a quarterback and receiver connection. You have it with Cornelius Stroud and Nathaniel Dell, and that's evident. This is the type of game the Texans can have when they give CJ time, and this was the CJ Stroud we saw at Ohio State so many times. Sure, the run game wasn't good, but after having 11 total wins since the start of the decade, after this game, or at least for the moment, who cares? You have something to build around on offense. For Jacksonville, guys, this type of start was my biggest fear, and it was that everyone automatically assumed they would win the AFC South by default because of how their 2022 season ended, and by the way, they can still very much win the AFC South, but they have 26 points in the last 2 games, and obviously that's not going to cut it. Their next 2 games are home against Atlanta and against the Bills across the pond. This is a bad situation for them to be in, and that's putting it mildly. Up to Northeast Ohio for Titans-Browns, and there's nothing I'm going to say to Titans fans that they already don't think. For anyone who didn't watch this game, Tennessee had 94 total yards of offense and were just 2 of 12 on third down. This offense is anemic at times, and it especially was in week 3. And there will be a video done on this at some point, but I truly think the A.J. Brown trade spinned this franchise completely around because it's been nothing but downhill since. For Cleveland, this defense is legit and has given up 1 touchdown in 3 games, which was a 70-plus yard touchdown to George Pickens. So in reality, they're a single play away, or a single big play away, from giving up 0 touchdowns in 3 games, which is insane compared to where they were last year. This was also the first game Deshaun Watson looked like the old Deshaun Watson, as he threw for nearly 300 yards and 2 touchdowns. And Browns fans, you know I had to include the play, but you won by 24 points, so please just have a good laugh about this play because it was hilarious. Down to Landover to discuss what was a Buffalo Bills highlight reel game. Buffalo sacked Sam Howell 9 times, they ran for over 165 yards as a team, Stephon Diggs went for over 100 yards, and they won the turnover battle 5-1. Washington was just 1 of 9 on third downs, and this was a good old-fashioned ass beating. There's no way around that, and Commanders fans, I am sorry you guys had to go through this game. My big takeaway for Buffalo is for everyone hyping up the Dolphins, and granted I think the Dolphins are legit, but Buffalo will have something to say about that, and the good news is, they play Miami next week. For Washington, this is an example of how quick things can change. It was an insane win over Denver in week 2, only to get punched in the mouth repeatedly in week 3. This was midway through the game, but Mina Kimes tweeted that Sam Howell was pressured on 79% of his dropbacks, and that's a recipe for disaster, and this game was a disaster for Washington. They play Philly next week, and I am eager to see how this team bounces back. Up I-295 to Baltimore to discuss Colts-Ravens, and this was a classic trap game for the Ravens. Yes, there were some non-calls for them, but the bottom line is they shouldn't have been in this game with the Colts to begin with. This game, with this weather, benefited Baltimore and their ground game, and they ran for nearly 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. Lamar's fumbles obviously don't help anybody, but again, this was a game the Ravens let slip away. Matt Gay had a hell of a game for Indy, and Kyle Hamilton had a hell of a game for the Ravens, but in 2022, the Colts beat the Chiefs in Week 3, and in 2023, they beat the Ravens in Week 3. Yes, this loss stings for Baltimore, but I don't think this isn't anything they can't clean up. They play Cleveland next week, which is going to be a very fun game to watch, and one I personally can't wait for, because the winner of that game could very well win the North. Great team win for Indy on the road, but I'd be lying if I said I think this propels them to anything of note this year. But that also isn't to say not to be excited about this win, because you should be. And hell, I might even take that last part back, because who knows when they get Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor back in the AFC South of all divisions. From Baltimore to Miami to discuss Broncos Dolphins, and guys, the Dolphins are a unit. 70 points. 70. The Dolphins threw for 376 yards and ran for 350 yards and had 10 touchdowns, and this was a statement game by Miami. They had 726 yards of total offense, they averaged 10.2 yards per play, they won the turnover battle 3-0, and this is a game that would take a lot of tries on Madden to replicate. This is a game you look at the box score and think it's made up, or it's Georgia playing FCS Midwest on NCAA 14. This was a complete annihilation of the Broncos. And for Denver, I try not to overreact a lot on the weekly recaps, but someone has to get fired over this. Whether it's Vance Joseph or a positions coach or whatever the case may be, how do you walk in this ensuing week and look your defense in the eye after giving up a college-level amount of points in this game? I mean, this is a truly embarrassing loss for Denver, and we did a video on this early last week, but they're not, and they were never a Sean Payton hiring away from seriously competing. This team is not good, and especially with the Russ contract, which is something else on its own. They're years away from getting back to being relevant. Now, up to Minnesota to discuss Chargers-Vikings, and this was a very Chargers-Vikings game. If Minnesota won this game, which they of course could have, Brandon Staley probably would have been fired. I still think Staley should be fired, as does most Chargers fans, I'm sure, but I do want to say Justin Herbert is so fun to watch, and Keenan Allen played his tail off in this game, and those guys each deserve this hard-fought win. I don't think a win like this changes anything from their long-term outlook, because ultimately I don't think Brandon Staley is a good coach, but the talent is more than there, and this game showed that. For Minnesota, the season is over, and we're not even to October, which is a far cry from where we were last year. Forget luck or any of that from 2022. This team makes constant mistakes both from play calling and in-game coaching decisions, and the end of this game was bad. Very bad. It shouldn't take a rocket scientist to let everyone know you should spike the ball near the end of the game to give your team some time to think about what to do, but instead they hurried everything up, the ball bounced out of TJ Hawkinson's hands, and they're 0-3. You don't come back from 0-3. You can come back from 1-2 and still make a season out of it, but not 0-3. Kevin O'Connell has been very disappointing and is in the midst of a sophomore slump from a coaching standpoint. Panthers-Seahawks is up, and the Panthers couldn't run the ball, and despite that, Andy Dalton played a lot better than people would have thought heading into this game. They were, of course, expected to lose, and ultimately did, but when you have a backup quarterback on the road, I think Adam Thielen and DJ Chark combining for 231 yards is very impressive, and will help with Bryce Young's confidence in them when he comes back. It's a rebuilding year, and the concern I have with this team lies in the run game. For Seattle, way to get a much-needed win, as you couldn't afford to drop to 1-2 in this division. This was a good team win, and the Seahawks rookies looked good too, which is always a positive. They play the Giants next Monday, and heading into the Week 5 bye at 3-1, rather than potentially 2-2 with a loss next week, is huge. So great win for Seattle, but Week 4 is very much a must-win game for them too. Bears-Chiefs time, and if you guys were not aware, I'd like to let you know that Taylor Swift was in attendance at this game. Now, from a football standpoint, this is about what I expected as the Chiefs killed a bad team. The Bears are bad, and I do think Matt Eberflus should be fired. Their last win was the win in New England last year, which has almost been a full calendar year at this point in time. They are a train wreck already, and Justin Fields wasn't good again, and there too will be a video on this team in the near future. There's not much to take away from this game for Chicago, at least more than we already know. For Kansas City, they took care of business against a bad team, and 10 Chiefs players caught passes in this game. This was a beatdown, and with their upcoming schedule, guys, they're probably going to be 5 or 6-1 before we know it. Cowboys-Cardinals time, and the Cardinals won by double digits over America's team. For Dallas, yes, this loss stings, and very few people would have predicted Arizona would beat this team by double digits entering Sunday. As much as I think Dallas can go a long way, they do have some things to clean up. The play calling, especially in the red zone, was suspect at times, and regardless of the Dak interception at the end, the lack of urgency was extremely frustrating for Dallas. In a league where anything can change in any given week, this is a prime example. And I know the Cardinals' expectations were low entering the year, but they have played good through the first 3 games, truly. And I think the big takeaway for Arizona is Jonathan Gannon is building a culture. And building a culture, whether they go 2-15 or 6-11 or whatever the case may be this year, is better than the tank everyone seemingly wants them to do. I hope you enjoyed the Week 3 recap, and if you did, please like the video and subscribe, as only about 24% of people watching are subscribed, and it helps tremendously. Please check out the pinned comment, as I think it will interest you, and until the next video, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.